It's time to let you in on a little secret. Actually, lots of secrets. We're talking strategy and, most importantly, return on your investment for your podcast. Welcome to Branded Podcast Secrets. All right, welcome to another episode of Branded Podcast Secrets. I'm your host, Erin Greger, here with another very special guest. Today, I have Brian Johnson. Brian, welcome.
Hi, Erin. Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm happy to have you. You are like an OG in the podcasting space, so this is going to be awesome. Because I can't imagine like how things have changed. You're on episode 477 now, which is really incredible. But for those of you who don't know Brian, he's the president of 7 Minute Security and the host of the 7 Minute Security podcast, all talking about security, cybersecurity, correct? There's some words that I saw on your website that I'm like, I don't even know what some of this stuff is. But yeah, and you've been podcasting since, is it 2013?
It's just about then. We're just kind of on our 7-year, I guess, podcast birth anniversary or something like that. So it's nuts. It feels like a huge amount of time and yet a blink of an eye all at once.
Oh, I love it. Well, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So I'd love to start with, you've got a great story I read about you, about why you chose podcasting. You needed to blog, you needed to create content, and you went down the podcasting route. Could you share a little bit about, that moment where you're like, okay, I need content, and I think podcasting is the route I want to take?
Yeah, and I had been a long-time blogger and just loved that. And I had kind of my own personal blog where I was doing movie reviews and all these sorts of things. And then kids and pets and things come along, right? And it just becomes harder to find that quiet time to sit somewhere and just bang out long-form blogs. And I loved podcasts forever, and I am currently a huge consumer of them. Always wanted to have them, but I had some big hang-ups about podcasts in general. And one was that most of them, I would say, that I listen to are just too long. I mean, they're just, you download the episode, you look at the runtime and you go 2 hours and 17 minutes. Like this better be really good. And then you get through the 2 hours and 17 minutes and you go, I really could have invested that time elsewhere. So I thought that would be my way to make a podcast that was kind of unique, but also just something shorter, kind of these bite-sized episodes. And so I thought, I can put together in a week, I can put together 7 minutes of content. And then the other kind of hang up I had about getting into podcasting was just the production time. And I just thought, to sit down and cut something together really professional and all that, there's just no way I have time for that during the week either. So kind of my escape hatch to that conundrum was to just make it super informal and just basically hit record on my iPhone in between gigs with customers. So when I really got heavy into cybersecurity in around 2013, it was a drinking from the fire hose experience. And there was so much I was learning, so much I was excited about that I wanted to share with other people who maybe were like me, where they had been long-time IT people, but were starting to get into cybersecurity and make that switch like I did. So I would just be, finishing up at customer A in the morning and on my way to customer B for the afternoon. So I would just hit record on the phone and stick it on the dash and go, okay, guys, here's this really cool, hacking tool that I just learned about. Here's what it's called. Here's where you get it. Here's what it got for me on this, test. Here's why it's awesome. And that's great. And talk to you next week. Bye. And that was just my, 7-minute little nugget. And that's kind of how it all got started.
I love it. You didn't overthink it, and it worked. So let me ask you this, because I was actually just on a podcasting presentation, for lack of a better term, today. And somebody had asked about finding that line in a business type podcast of entertaining versus, basically the premise of it was they're a little fearful of being too dry. And, in the terms of cybersecurity, it's a tough topic and you can go very deep in weeds very quickly, right?
Yeah.
So I would think knowing your audience is so crucial in this perspective. Did you, in figuring that out and what your audience would want and how to, toe that line, did you work through any of that as you were creating the content?
I wish I had like this really great business smart answer to give you, Aaron, but I'll be totally honest in that I didn't give that kind of business stuff any thought at all because I was working for somebody else at the time. So I was working for some other security organization, really just wanting to share a passion project that was fun and that I could, do on the side. So fortunately, I think started with just, I don't really care who the audience is. When I look at the stats, if I see there's more than one download, meaning it's me and somebody else, that means somebody out there is listening to it, hopefully getting value out of it. And so I'm just able to start and talk about the things that I'm passionate about. And, it would be so different if I were to just start it fresh today. But since it was really my passion project, I didn't honestly care too much about growing it or ever I never was going to use it for like my business like I do now. So I was just completely me. So as the episodes, and kind of the joke a little bit with the people that have been following the podcast for a while is that now the episodes are much more than 7 minutes because we interview people and we talk about news and those kind of things we just can't squeeze into 7 minutes anymore. But I was always very much myself, which is just a kind of a big dumb animal, and it's full of dad jokes and that kind of thing. And I didn't care because that's another complaint I had about podcasts is so many of the hosts I felt were just putting on their podcast or TV face, and they had sort of this artificial bad morning DJ tone to their voice. And whenever I listen to those podcasts, I'm like, I spend 1 or 2 hours with these folks every week, and I want to feel like I get to know them a little bit. Like I want to know what are some of their bruises, what are some of their complaints and pain points about the world, not just this happy artificial smile radio DJ face. And so I was always really transparent, and I would share stuff about my family, or I would try to share a funny story in the midst of the security stuff, so that yes, I could give nuggets of value and give people a reason to listen, but also give them a little peek into who I was as a person. And so, once then 7 Minute Security, the business, was started in late 2017, I just didn't change the format or the trajectory at all. And that's really been, as I've had business consultants come in and try to, give their advice on growing 7 Minute Security, they've got all these opinions on like, you got to be much more serious. Don't treat these people like they're just sitting with you as you zip down the Minnesota highways, recording your podcast. And I still, I understand their point, but I still couldn't disagree with it more. And I've like not changed at all with the podcast. And the main reason is because we'll get, the podcast is our biggest source of leads for security projects. And one of the reasons and one of the themes we hear from customers, they'll call or they'll write in off the website and say, hey, you know what? I listened to your podcast. I laughed about the story you had about your parents' dog, taking a dump inside your house, something really silly, right? But then we also listened, and it sounds like, you guys are nice. You're not condescending. We like you. And so the conversation goes right to, here's the security needs we have. Is there a fit from a skill set standpoint and a price standpoint? And that's like the best leads in the world for a business person, where I don't have to come in cold and try to put up these big PowerPoints and sell you on 7 Minute Security. Like they're just ready to talk. They feel like they know us. And so now we're just getting to know them. And I mean, it's been so, just so wonderful to have that little podcast engine out there on the internet that is generating business for us. And I think a lot of it is just, we're just going to be who we are. And that's not going to be for everybody. And I understand that. And that's what I tease that, these smart business people tell me, don't be me on the podcast. And I'm sure there's some people that listen to it and go, oh, they're being kind of goofy. That's too goofy for me. Well, that's okay. Probably I'm not the right fit for those customers anyway. And we've just been so blessed because the customers we have are just like more like us, just easygoing, just real people that, want to secure their organizations and don't mind joking about stuff and are, fun to be around. And we've gotten to know them really personally as well. And those are the kind of relationships we're looking for. So sorry, that was a lot. That was a really long answer to probably a
No, that was
short question.
so full of awesomeness. No, I love it that it's your number one lead generator, that
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I'm not everybody's cup of tea too. I had to take till I was about 40 to understand that and appreciate it, but
Yeah.
it is like, and when you're doing business with people, we were just doing this with my business partner and I were going through it, like who are our favorite customers and how do we get more of those versus just more of anyone? And
Yeah.
it's
Right.
that, how you jive with those people. I have to ask, so did the podcast help propel your consulting business, or was that something
Oh,
kind of, I want to hear that story.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was so amazing to have that because when I've always been really transparent in the podcast about kind of my infosec career because we try to give people advice on, here's some things to do in an interview that will help you stand out amongst other candidates. And I kind of talked through the ups and downs of my career a few years ago where I locked into what I thought was my dream job. And then they outsourced that whole team to India. And so my options were to move to India or, stay put. And then eventually I was talking in the podcast about how I just felt it was on my heart. Like I have to try to go on my own, at least give it a year and try to do 7 minute security, the business. So I sort of announced like, hey folks, we're out there now. We got a website and we're official. And I mean, out of the gate within like the first month, people heard that episode and they're like, oh, we've been listening forever. We've got a ethical hacking, penetration test coming up, our yearly one that we need for compliance. We'd like you to do it. And I mean, bam, we had business immediately. And I don't I don't know. I'm sure it would have been a much slower start to just get our name out there and right try to tell people about us and do the PowerPoint song and dance and all that. But again, we had this podcast engine out there that announced that to people, and we had business immediately. I mean, there was maybe a slow ramp up period of 2 or 3 weeks, but I mean, thank God we've been super busy ever since.
That's incredible. I love those stories. So you touched a little bit about how it's evolved and changed.
Yeah.
And I love, it's gone over 7 minutes. You have the interviews. It's, not just you driving anymore, but
Right.
like, has there been specific strategy behind it? I know you said you've kept a lot of that originality of you, which I love, but you're like, okay, this is becoming a lead generator.
Yep.
What has changed? Have you added lead gen items within the podcast? Like, this is where you need to call me or email, you know what I mean? Or have you done specific things to actually be more purposeful in utilizing it to bring people into your company?
Yeah, so we started, so the company got off the ground late 2017, early 2018, and then I think it was around early 2019, we just thought, even though we've got this business over here generating revenue, it would be nice if the podcast brought in at least some dollars just to cover the cost of, hosting the podcast and hosting the website that has the show notes for all the episodes and a little bit of our time to produce it and put it together. So, I had kind of talked to other podcast hosts and done a bunch of Googling, and it seemed like there wasn't an exact art and science to finding sponsors. I thought maybe they would come looking for you, which some have, but I just went with kind of a grassroots effort approach, and I just reached out to different tech and security companies that I liked their products and services or had used them in past jobs. And you go to their website, and most of them have a contact our sales group at sales@domain.com, right? And I would just write in and introduce myself and say, hey, I do this podcast. I have some stats here on kind of our listenership and where people are coming from, and I've sort of informally polled our audience. I've never really sent out a survey monkey or anything. I've just got the stats people have shared with me, but I just said, hey, I love your product, I love your service. It would be great if you wanted to sponsor us, and then I just kind of uh, guessed at some tiers or some different levels people could sponsor us at. So I have kind of a tier that's just if you want to be mentioned at the beginning of the show, that's X dollars. If you want to be mentioned in the top of the show and then also have a 45 or 60-second ad read in the middle, that's this tier. Or if you want to do a featured interview with one of your experts about your product and service, that's another tier. And I am pleasantly surprised that that got us traction with companies right away. I mean, and in a way, I look back and go, well, yeah, I suppose that's a great fit for them. I mean, to have somebody who already likes their stuff. But I thought that would keep us in line with, I always wanted to be really sincere and partner with products that I liked and believed in, because there's so much out there for IT and security products and services. A lot of them are no good at all. And I just thought, oh, what if I get some of those in the door where it's like, yes, I'd like the money, but what if I hate this product? I don't want to have my name attached to something I don't believe in. And so we've gotten probably, a handful of maybe half a dozen sponsors that have been with us since then. And they come back every year and say, hey, I want 4 episodes, or I want 5, or whatever. And we kind of go from there. But I'm still really trying to keep that podcast pure, I guess, for lack of a better word, where we're talking about things that we actually like, where it's not getting too commercial. And I'm really clear with the sponsors too about, even if I do a featured interview with one of your experts, I don't want this just to be a TV commercial for your product and service where it's full of acronyms and buzzwords. Like I'm gonna ask them some tough questions, and I want our audience to like understand the goods and maybe even the bads of your product. And it's, for the most part, they're like, yeah, we're totally okay with that. We want honest and true conversations. And so yeah, that's just led to some introductions to some great companies, and then sometimes in turn they getting to know us better when they have customers that need security training and penetration testing, then we get some more business leads out of it. So I think it's a situation where everybody wins.
Yeah, you're getting paid to get connections to get business leads.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it that way, it's like, I don't think it comes any better.
No. Yeah, you're right on.
That's crazy. So I'm curious about your marketing standpoint of it too, because you are in such a niche, genre that I would think like you could go into associations or different groups pretty easily to kind of connect that. How have you marketed your podcast, and what have you found that's worked really well as you've, gone over at almost 500 episodes? I would think you've had some trial and error and trial and some good results.
Yeah, and I think with the marketing approach has again been really loosey goosey, if I'm being transparent, because again, these smart business people that'll come in and consult with me, they'll say, you need a lot more structure. You need to, they always tell me I need to know my audience better, which I agree. And probably any case, you want to know them better. But I've always said, I started this as a passion project, and there are a few main things that I really want to, I get out of bed excited to talk about, and that's some of the hacking stuff, right? The talking about tools and ways to defend against hacking. I love to talk about helping people further their security career. So we talk a lot about different certifications and training that are out there, help people pass those certs and get into a new job and a higher salary bracket and all that. And so, those are the things that I've never really strayed from, just from a marketing standpoint. So I've tried to take those passions and then dig in even deeper. So when these business people really pressured me to take a look at the download statistics for every episode, they said, try to at least find out what has the most downloads, so that and at least can be somewhat aware of, well, gosh, what topics do we hit that people really, click those links and consume that information. And it was interesting, but maybe not super surprising, that the stuff I was most passionate about, those episodes did get the highest amount of downloads. So we have a series we do called Tales of Pen Test Pwnage. And what that really is us telling stories about where we've tried to, ethically break into buildings, break into networks, call people and try to try to talk them out of their passwords and their personal information. So we talk about all of those things, and those by far get the most traction, the most downloads, and convert people from listeners to customers. And I think my like biggest testimony to that series of episodes, like my favorite part about them, is that about a year ago, then we had a company call us from, I think they're from New York or California. They called and said, "Hey, we've been listening for years to this series where you tell the stories about hacking networks and the things that you find over and over again that you wish people would fix so that your job was harder. And we've gone into our network and we've fixed all those things. So we're saying, come at us, fella. Like, we're ready to have you come in and do a
That's
hacking test."
awesome.
Yeah, it was so great. So we went in there and it was the hardest test we've ever done. And we were, it was just so deeply satisfying to be like, hey, there's this content out there. People are taking it to heart and they're using it to make their companies more secure. And then that makes our job harder, and we have to then raise our skill set to the next level. So yeah, I guess, sorry, long answer to a short question. I think that the marketing has been, yeah, pretty informal, but we've tried to just dig deep into the stuff we love and stay there, rather than, I mean, we could go so broad, right, and be like a news show, and we could also be, having these different security pundits come on and give their opinion on things, and we do that sometimes, but we always try to, we'll do that for a week or two, then come back to the core, because it seems like that's where like the heart of our audience is, and we're talking about the things that they love.
I love these stories. And it's so funny. I was talking to somebody who was in insurance a few weeks ago, and I'm like, everybody wants the horror stories. Like, everybody wants to know, like, where, like, it's like cybersecurity is exact same. Nobody thinks about it until their computer is hacked, or like
Right.
it's. So I think that's why those kind of those episodes probably do so well, as like it exposes people like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of this stuff. And
Yeah, for
now
sure.
this person's company is completely compromised, you know?
Yeah. And that's, I think, the thing that just keeps us coming back to it. It makes it's made the time fly, is just to know that, again, even if somebody hears an episode and there's 15 tips in there, right? And one person takes one of those tips, changes some security configuration or habit that they have, we may never know what that one change might have saved them from down the road, from, having their computer hacked, having their email, their bank account hacked. And that's why this is like my favorite job in the world and favorite industry to be in, because you can affect things. Small changes can just have such a great positive effect for individuals and companies.
Wow. Brian, this has been awesome. I wish I could ask about 20 more questions. You are like the quintessential, like, perfect story of how this truly works. And I'm going to go against all the quote unquote smart people and tell you, I think what you're doing is brilliant. Don't change. I think being yourself is really key. Because you're right. That ability. I feel like sometimes, the people I listen to on podcasts are my friends, and who are you going to go hire when you are, for something serious like this? You want to feel like they know what they're talking about, and that you like them and you trust them. And that's exactly how you build it. So if somebody wanted to listen to 7-Minute Security, where is the best place? Or they wanted to hire you, even better, but where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, if you just Google 7-Minute Security, you'll find us on a couple different sites. 7MinSec, so that's number 7, MINSEC.com. That's our business portal, so that'll tell you all about our different services we provide. And then 7ms.us, so that's number 7ms.us. That's kind of the home for all things to do with the podcast. So there's lots of notes there on the kind of things we talk about on the show, and there's sort of two separate entities, but really under one 7-Minute Security roof. And so you got the podcast that's free. We welcome people to check that out. Otherwise, if they're people are looking for a deeper look at their business and maybe figure out where some of the bodies are buried and where some of the security weaknesses are, we'd love to work with you and help you there too. So thanks for the opportunity to chat with you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And of course, all that will be in the show notes too. So definitely connect with Brian if you're interested in learning more. So Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really awesome.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. I appreciate it. It was fun. Have a great day.
You too.